What up? What up? What up? Big show today. I got one of my favorite guests coming back on the show. So, new episode, The Real Deal, episode 121. What up, Boston is the theme of the show. Let's get it. All right. Welcome to another exciting episode of The Real Deal. I am your host, as always, Courtney Harden. Glad to be back on a Saturday, gloomy week here in Philly. But we are live once again, back again with another episode. This one's episode 121. What up, Boston? You guys will know what the theme is all about once I bring my guest in a few minutes. But we are presented by BS3 Network, bs3network.com. We're live on Roku, BS3 TV app. Download the app. We can get all the content there. Again, BS3 Live, the BS3TVLive.com. You can find all the content there. You can find it on BS3Network.com. Find it on Spotify, Google Play, all the podcast platforms, Apple as well. Follow The Real Deal on Get the Real Deal on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the socials, and if you just Google The Real Deal with Courtney Harden, that's where you can find it. So yeah, if you have a hard time finding it, just Google The Real Deal with Courtney Harden. So without further ado, like I said, I'm going to bring my guest. Like I said, is the theme is called "What Up, Boston." So I'm gonna bring. She is Boston through and through. So she's been on the show many times, and she's. If you've seen her now, if you see her from a couple years ago till today, she has grown so much, and just the trajectory of her career has just blossomed so much. And I'm just excited to call her friend, podcast partner, and all those things. So here she is. Gabby Hurlbut. She is the host of Boston Ballin Podcast, popular podcast as well. And now she's the new host of Locked On Red Sox podcast, which is a daily podcast as well. So we're going to get into all of that, her being the host there. So Gabby, welcome back to the show for like the 15th time. We've done two shows together. So thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Courtney, thanks so much for having me on again. It's always such a good time coming on here and chatting with you. And like you just said, it has to be a record for
Yeah.
two people doing podcasts together, how many times you and I have done shows together.
Yeah, we've done a lot of shows together. I've been on your show a few times, and you've been on my show a lot of times. So it's always great to catch up. It's been a little bit because you've been pretty busy and everything too. So how's everything going? And thank you again for taking the time.
Yeah, everything's been great. Definitely busy, like you said, working on some new things, but overall been really good. And life overall has been pretty good too. So that's definitely obviously important as well.
Yeah, yes, you got life, and then you said your professional career. But like I said, life is just enjoying life. But I'm glad to see, like I said, you like over the last couple of years, your professional career has just blown up and everything too. So let's get into it. First, we'll get into the Boston Balling things. How's Boston Balling going? Everyone that don't know, Gabby has been the host of Boston Weekly Show. Talks about Boston sports mostly, but everything really nationally. So how's the Boston Balling going so far?
Yeah, it's been going super well. I mean, when I started it in December 2020, I had no idea that it was going to turn into what it has. I had no expectations going into it. I was a little nervous thinking nobody was going to want to listen to it. Because I kept saying, who's going to care about what I have to say about Boston sports? I'm just some random person talking about it.
Right.
But I've been able to land some great guests that are pretty big in the Boston sports community, which has definitely helped me grow the show. And it's also been enjoyable for me because I'm able to hear different perspectives from different people on things. So that's been really enjoyable for me too, is to really watch the show develop into what it has in the last 2.5 years or so, and just really see how many people, Boston sports fans in particular, but even I know a lot of other people who aren't Boston fans that still listen to it, because I'll do crossover episodes where I bring on people who are fans of other teams that aren't Boston, and maybe previewing games that the teams have coming up. So it's definitely cool to have those interactions with people and just really be able to just hear different perspectives and talk to people who have been in the industry for a while too.
Yeah, I love it. Like I said, I've been on at least 3 times on the show. We've got into a lot of different discussions. Not just Boston, but just generally over the NFL and the NBA trades and draft and NFL draft. So we've done, like I said, we've done quite a few episodes together. You've been on my show at least 10 times. I would assume something like that. But it's always great to have you back on, and I'm glad Boston Ballin has given you even more opportunities as well. So let's talk about that other opportunity. I remember you broke the news right on Twitter and Instagram, being the host of Locked On Red Sox, and Locked On, the network itself. They got so many different with different teams, I think all baseball, all baseball teams as well. And I think they do some NBA. They do a lot of coverage. So it's a daily podcast on all things Boston Red Sox, which, like I said, you know it, and know it so well and everything too. So talk about how that opportunity came about, and the you say it's get so fast, but talk about how you got to be the host of Locked On Red Sox.
Yeah, so the Locked On Podcast Network, for people who may be unfamiliar, it's a pretty big, well-known podcast network. It's one of the biggest networks in the world, actually, for podcasts.
Yeah.
They do shows for every major sports team across the 4 major sports. So they have a show for every NBA team, every NFL team, every MLB team, and every NHL team. And they have shows on the biggest college sports teams as well. And they have some betting shows. They have general shows like Locked On MLB, Locked On NBA. So they have a lot of general shows as well, where they talk about kind of everything that's going on in that sport. But they've really, really grown and really expanded. So they have quite a variety of different shows. So whoever your favorite professional sports team is, they have a show on it. So it's pretty cool to just really see how much the network has grown and be a part of that. They have some great hosts on the network who have really established themselves within the industry. So it's cool to be able to say I can work alongside some of those people now too. But so the Locked On Network, I had been familiar with it for a while, and the Red Sox show had 2 co-hosts who recently left for really great opportunities. One left for a position with DraftKings, and the other one went to work for Mass Live. So they definitely really did a good job of really developing their following when they were hosting the show. And when they were hosting it, they had asked me to be a guest on the show. So I had really gotten to get a sense of what it was like to be on that show, and a little bit of what it entailed. And I really got to talk to them a lot about it. And each of them individually had been guests on Boston Balling. So I was pretty familiar with it, and I follow them both on Twitter. So then when I saw that they were leaving, it was a pretty quick process. I was actually familiar with the person who used to be the MLB channel manager, and he's now since moved over to NHL. But he referred me to the new MLB channel manager, and because he really liked my content and has enjoyed interacting with me through Twitter. So I had kind of always known him. So then the new channel manager did an interview with me, and then I went through a second round interview with a higher up from him. Essentially, he's the director of talent and scouting for the network. So I met with him too. And then, so it was kind of a quick process. And then about a week or so after that, they offered me the position and they said they wanted to make me the new host of the show. So I'm solo hosting. So there were two people that co-hosted it before. I'm doing it solo. They have a mix on the network. Some people who host shows solo and some people where it's you have a co-host and do it.
Yeah.
But it's a Monday through Friday show talking all things Red Sox. And ultimately they said that they hired me because they can see even through my social media how passionate I am about the Red Sox and just how good I am about interacting with people who follow me and talking about the team on a day-to-day basis. And they said that's something that they were really looking for. So I did my first couple episodes this past week and it went pretty well. So I'm definitely still fresh in it, but it's just a way to be able to talk Red Sox every day, which is something that I could have only dreamed of doing a couple of years ago. So
Right.
ultimately, everything that I've been doing and all the work that I've been putting into Boston Balling, it really feels like it's paying off now because it helped me land such a cool opportunity now.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that. Very well deserved. I just like I said, I remember when you first started, and this a couple of years ago, and you had, we already told the story how how you started. You was on my podcast a couple of years ago, and you said this was fun. I want to start my own podcast, and you were like, "How did start?" I said, "Hey, you find a topic. You already are very knowledgeable of a lot of sports, not just Boston, just a lot of sports." And you said how it started. I just told you just start talking. Basically, just start talking about something you're passionate about. And you found topics that you were passionate about, like you passionate about Boston sports. From all four major sports and even college sports as well. And I said, just start talking. Just you'll gain your audience. You'll gain all the traction, things like that. And you did it. You put in the work over these last few years, and now this is where you land at now. And as you said, you're doing a solo. Being a solo host, you've already been doing that, on top of with the Boston Ballin. Now it's just daily. Now that it's daily, you're putting in all that work daily. Before it was just a week. You was doing Boston Ball's weekly show, and now it's daily. How's that transition been? Now doing a daily show, even though you say you're very passionate about Boston sports on Twitter and everything too, and tweet out a lot of different things, researching all that. But how's it like now doing a daily show from doing just a weekly show?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit different because you're constantly having to stay alert of what is going on and what the audience might want to hear on a day-to-day basis, because obviously with baseball they play so many games, so the storylines could constantly be changing day to day. So it's really being able to keep up with on social media, what fans are talking about and what they might want to hear from you. Whereas when I was doing Boston Balling, it's different because, like you said, I was doing it weekly, but also I was talking about more teams. So I was covering Boston sports more as a whole. So I could be talking about maybe the Celtics one week and then the Patriots the next week. So it's not like I have to fill every episode with like Patriots content. So it's definitely interesting because I get to focus on one team, my favorite team and my favorite sport, and just cover it on a day-to-day basis. But it's really a matter of being able to keep up with what currently at the time would be the most interesting topics for the fan base to hear about. And then a lot of times it's, after a game is primarily when I'm finding that I'm recording the episodes. So that way I can kind of be up to date with most recently what happened. And so it's a lot of times after a game I'll record an episode, but that's kind of the pattern I'm going to be getting into. So it's a lot more of just staying alert and a lot more of just being aware of, what is the biggest topic of the day that Red Sox fans might want to hear about.
Yeah, yes, and you're right, because you see a lot of these daily shows and throughout the networks and things like that, and it's like I said, just being on top of everything, even though you already are. Now you're really got to be on top. He said Monday through Friday now, and but like I said, congratulations. Like you said, you're on one of the, he said, the biggest network that covers all sports and all teams. He said if you needed like coverage of any team that you like, the Locked On Podcast Network has it. So
They do. Yeah.
they do, whether
Yeah.
it's Red Sox, whether it's the Blue Jays, whether it's the Yankees, whatever in any sport, the Denver Nuggets, whatever it is, you can find it on. I remember listening to a lot of the Locked On network, the podcast network, on different teams, and they said they do a lot of teams, a lot of every sport. So it's a great network to be on. So I know you're very, very excited to be on that now. And then, like I said, covering your favorite team,
Yeah,
that's got to be
what's
drinking
cool
turf.
about it too
Yeah.
is like they really do pick hosts who are super passionate about the team and super knowledgeable about the team. So if you're listening to a Locked On show, you can trust that that host really is on top of everything that's going on with that team. So that's why it's cool to really be able to be among people who are just as passionate about their favorite team as I am. And they do crossover episodes too. I mean, I'll probably start doing episodes where, if the Red Sox have the Rays coming up on their schedule, maybe I bring the Locked On Rays host on to do an episode with me to kind of preview that series. So there's a lot of things like that goes on as well. And then you're appealing to both fan bases of both teams by doing kind of a combined episode with the host of that show, and kind of expanding your horizons on the show too by showing that you can talk to another host about another team as well.
That's cool. Like you said, the connection, you talked about that now. Like you building the connections that you have now on. You said you were already on the Locked On Red Sox, their podcast as it was as a guest. So now you could just network and connect and bring them on Boston Ballin and other and on the Locked On Red Sox podcast. I know we always talk about how we select our guests for the shows, but it's all about that connection. And now your portfolio of connections now is going to just grow just exponentially now with being the host, the daily host of the podcast.
Yeah, and it's going to be super fun. I mean, I had an absolute blast recording my first couple episodes. So I can tell this is really something that I'm going to enjoy. And one of the biggest challenges that I found when I recorded the first episode was when I was doing the prep and figuring out how to time everything out so that I could fit it in to the show length that they're looking for, because there's so much that you can talk about on a day-to-day basis, but it's about selecting and prioritizing what the most important things are, and then turning those into segments that you can talk about, but also being able to discuss what the most important things are, because you only have a certain period of time that you can talk about that for during the show. So that's something that I'm still working on figuring out, but it's all part of the learning process, because ultimately I really want to continue to learn to be a better podcast host.
Oh, no doubt. Yeah, I agree. And you'll find your pace. You'll find, like you said, you've been doing this now for the last few years with Boston Ball, and it's just transitioned to, like you said, the daily show. Now I'm sure you will definitely find your pace and the important topics each and every day, because as you said, just like any other fan base, Red Sox fans are passionate, and just like Philly fans and just like Yankee fans or whatever, they're so passionate. They said they just want to hear the news and anything that and you said you're a great host, so you'll definitely find your pace and find that rhythm of what works and what doesn't work. That's why I always try it out. So I did listen to the first episode that you did, and I really enjoyed it. Even though I'm not a Red Sox fan, but I enjoyed it because I know how you work and how you prep. So I really, really knew. Like I said, yeah, this fits. This is Gabby's wheelhouse right here. Red Sox or Patriots or Boston Celtics or Bruins, whatever it is, Boston sports or UConn, you're definitely going to definitely succeed. So again, I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, everyone tune in daily on the Locked On Podcast Network, Locked On Red Sox. So definitely check out Gabby on theirs. Again, big congrats on that move. Really, and it's really well deserved.
Thank you so much, Courtney. I really appreciate that. And I also appreciate you tuning into the episode too.
Yeah.
Because the support definitely means everything to me.
Yeah, yes. I always had if you got great support, like you got a fan base already from your Boston Balling podcast. I was gonna ask, I said, so now you're doing the daily. I'm sure that your baby is Boston Balling. I'm sure you're gonna keep that and
Yes.
continue to perfect that and continue to work with that. So that was gonna be my next question, but you've already kind of answered that. It's like, oh yeah, Boston Balling is still gonna be that's my thing. I'm gonna continue to do that.
You know what I found to be pretty cool was when I made the announcement on social media about becoming the new Locked On Red Sox host. So many people asked me if I was still going to be doing Boston Balling. And that to me said a lot because it really made me feel like people enjoy Boston Balling and would be genuinely sad if I didn't have that show anymore. So that felt good to me because I was like, wow, I really started something good with Boston Balling and people really enjoy listening. And I've had so many people who have been loyal listeners to that show. And, so what's cool is those people followed me to Locked On Red Sox too and have reached out to me about how they enjoyed the first couple episodes of that. But they also still, hope that I'm doing Boston Balling. So I definitely am because Boston Balling still gives me an outlet to be able to cover the other Boston sports teams and be able to really continue to do what I'm doing because I don't want to, give that up because I worked so hard to grow Boston Balling into what it is. So it's definitely still going to be continuing.
Yeah, that's like I said, that's how you started. So I knew when we were talking off air, I was like, I know you were going to continue to keep Boston Balling because you said you worked so hard to brand that to get that brand to where it is today. So it only makes sense, and like you said, it branches out to all your other avenues and other sports you like to talk about as well. Speaking of sports, we got to get it. I'm so great timing to have you on the NBA draft and the trades. And now that the Boston Celtics, since we're going to talk Boston, got to talk Celtics. Boston Celtics finished in the Eastern Conference Finals, losing to the Heat in 7. What a series that was! I'm going to get your reaction on that first before we get into the trade because we haven't talked since. We haven't talked much. We talked off air, but not on like podcast. What was your reaction with the Celtics? Their season, the way it ended, they were down 3-0 against the Heat. I tell you the truth, when they were down 3, I was like, okay, this is going to be over quickly. I figured they'll get a game, but I thought Miami's going to just finish them out at 5. But the Celtics fought, and it's been that type of year for them this season, especially this playoffs. And then they lose in 7 at home. Almost could have lost to the Sixers when they were down in that series, and they fought and clawed. But what was your reaction to the Celtics season, how it ended, and it was just a game away from getting to the finals again?
Yeah, definitely disappointing is the biggest word that I can think of. And the primary thing for me, just from watching the Celtics all season and even going into the playoffs and how they looked, was inconsistency. All season this year, we saw a team that you didn't really know what version you were going to get. They were either looked like a team that was unbeatable for a lot of the season, but then they would lose to teams they shouldn't have lost to and just played games where they were just committing so many turnovers and just stupid mistakes and just looking like not a good team or not being able to score. And so it was just a lot of up and down, a really, really up and down season. And ultimately that was something I think that caught up with them in the playoffs. I mean, we saw a little bit of it in the series against Atlanta, and they were obviously able to come in and win that series. But I was unfortunately at game 5 where they had that game in the bag against Atlanta at home, and then they blew it and they lost that game. But that game should have been what ended that series. So that was the start of that. I mean, they gave up a big lead in that game, which they had done a lot during the season. And then they go into the series against Philly, and the inconsistencies I saw in that series were crazy. It was a very up and down Celtics team. Obviously, they lost game 1 at home. without Embiid playing. And I said, that's a game you should win when, when Philly's superstar is out, and they couldn't win that game. So then, obviously they were able to come back in that series, but that whole series, I said, they can't get away with, playing too sloppy a basketball here, because Philly's a good team and they will beat you if you do that. And so they were able to squeak by. I mean, they looked fantastic in game 7. Tatum, towards the end of game 6 and game 7, deserves so much credit because he really carried that team on his back in the fourth quarter of game 6 and was the one that saved the season in game 6. And if he didn't do what he did in that fourth quarter, then they don't win game 6 of that series. So he deserves a ton of credit for that. And also what he did in game 7 was just phenomenal. And it was super fun. And I was like, why can't we get this version of Tatum all the time?
All the time, yeah.
So obviously that game 7 was super fun. Then they go into the series against Miami. And I remember saying before that series, because the Heat surprised a lot of people with just what they did in the postseason. But I did say going into that series, I did think the Celtics would win it because I thought they were the better team. But I said it's hard to just sleep on Eric Spoelstra. I think he's one of the best coaches in the league right now, if not maybe the best coach in the league. So I said he's far more experienced than Joe Mazzulla. And I think there's a good chance that Mazzulla gets out coached by him in the series. And Mazzulla, from a coaching standpoint, during the playoffs, didn't always make the best decisions. I think his timeout management was pretty poor all the way up until halfway through the Heat series. And just his rotations, I thought, were a little strange. But I did notice a difference with him after game 3 of the Heat series when their backs were against the wall and something had to change. He did change some of the decisions he made from a coaching standpoint. When they went down 3-0, I also thought what you thought. I was like, they might not get swept. They might pull off winning a game now, but I thought that it would be over in 5 at that point, because I was like, this team is just not playing the way that they should be playing. Yeah. And they looked literally awful in game 2 and game 3. Game 3 especially was one of the worst games of Celtics basketball I've seen all year. And that was super upsetting to watch, because I was like, it looks like they aren't trying and like they just don't have the energy to do this. And they looked completely checked out in game 3. And then they come back, they look good for 3 games. And then I said, once they won game 6, I said, anything can happen in a game 7. They now forced this series back home. Both teams are risking elimination. You really never know what can happen. So they did restore a little bit of hope after game 6, but then they went back to not playing well in game 7. And that was just kind of the definition of their season. And the fact that they are a team that was really turnover prone, they were going up against a team that was really good at forcing turnovers. So ultimately, I think Eric Spoelstra was able to really capitalize on the Celtics' mistakes and what their weaknesses were all season. And he had that team prepared, and ultimately they just played a better series.
Yeah, agree. 100% agree on everything with the Celtics season. A great recap. And it's interesting because that I also go back to the Sixers and the Celtics series. I remember watching it, and it was like the Sixers, it was almost like both teams didn't want to win. It just seemed that way because the Sixers, when they got up in the series and they were up 3-2 going home, playing well, and then it's for some reason just looked out of sorts. Like they had that game won, and then like you said, Tatum, he was having one of his worst games of his career. I think he was 2 at one point, was one of 16 or something like that. And then next thing you know, he hits 4 threes in the fourth quarter, and the Sixers blow it. And I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. So that the Sixers, they had that series won. And then it goes back to Boston, and then Tatum has a 51 and has an unbelievable, like you said, it just stuck. Like the Sixers should have finished them when they had the chance. They had them beat, but it just didn't happen. And then Tatum took over, he said, in the fourth quarter of that game 6, and then the game 7 had one of his best, if not his best game of his career from that. And then, like I said, going into the Miami series, Miami wasn't your typical 8 seed either. They they were the number 1 seed last year. They probably shouldn't have been an 8 seed this year, but with injuries and inconsistent play, laying them into the 8 seed, and they took out good team. I mean, they took out the number 1 team, the Bucks, in the first round with Giannis, and then they took out the Knicks, and then they go against the Celtics, the number 2 seed, and from even last year, Miami and the Celtics played a 7-game series last year, and it took Jimmy Butler missing a 3. So I thought going into this series, I'm like, okay, this is going to be a closer. I did pick the Celtics. I picked the Celtics as a 7 in that series, but Miami jumping up 3-0 just really showed like, like this is going to be over quickly. But he said Celtics showed some heart. They showed determination and made it a series. But then in the end, Miami just proved to be just at that moment the better team. And now, they got to the finals and eventually losing to Denver. But the Celtics it was just like I said, with Joe Mazzulla, his first year as coach, and trying to adjust, make adjustments and things like that. It just kind of it just reared the inconsistency, just reared an ugly head. And it caught up to him in the Miami series, and that's what really happened. But now going to this off season, yes, there was going to be some changes, but I want to get your opinion on this trade. With they get Kristaps Porzingis, talented big man who just has to stay healthy, but to get him, they lose their heart and soul and Marcus Smart. So once I knew I was on the show and this happened, I was like, okay, I got to definitely get Gabby's reaction to Marcus Smart. I know you're a big Marcus Smart fan. He was the heart of the Boston Celtics, defensive player of the year last season, 2022. But what was your reaction to the trade, big trade, getting Porzingis? Are you excited about the trade, or are you disappointed that they had to get rid of Marcus Smart?
Yeah, I think definitely a mix of both. I think this one really, really hurt a lot of Celtics fans having to get rid of Marcus because, he was the longest tenured player on the team. He loved Boston. I think based on his reaction and his comments, he was saying he was shocked that he was moved and he wanted to retire in Boston. So that's all heartbreaking to hear because you could just tell the passion and heart that he had. I mean, he really was, like you said, the heart of that team, and he showed the most of that out of anybody on that squad. And he really was the one kind of like the glue for that team because you think of the Celtics and he's always one of the ones that you would think of. And the saddest thing for me about that was just thinking about, the Celtics, maybe if they do win a championship in the near future, him not being able to be a part of that, I think almost feels wrong. To me, because of how long he's been with the team and just everything he's done for Boston. And he's a genuinely good person too. I mean, he does a lot outside of basketball to just, he has his charity and everything like that. And he's just a genuinely good person too. So it's just nice to have somebody like that on your team. And obviously, like you said, his defense was phenomenal and he's one of the best defensive players in the sport. I did think, and I talked about this on Boston Balling a couple of weeks ago, I did say, I think that we see some people moved that might be bigger names that could be unexpected. Who that was, I wasn't 100% sure of because I was like, Brad Stevens, I think could go a lot of different directions. The only thing I felt confident in going into the postseason was that Tatum and Brown weren't going to be moved. I think he still sees those two as the duo that they need to win a championship. Right. And I feel that way too. I think it's just a matter of surrounding them with the right pieces around them. But I do think those two together are talented enough to be able to lead the Celtics to a championship. They just need the right talent around them. And I think when it comes to this trade, obviously when they sent Marcus to the Grizzlies, they got in return 2 first-round picks, which I thought was impressive as it was, like one for this year and one for next year. And I thought, I was like, the fact that Brad Stevens was able to turn Marcus Smart into 2 first-round picks is good because with his caliber of talent, you should be giving up first-round picks. So I was happy he was able to get that, then didn't even use the first rounder this year and just kept trading down in the draft. And I was
Yeah.
Stevens like doing. So it definitely is upsetting as a Celtics fan, but I'm also not overly surprised because I did feel like we were going to see some changes this offseason. I felt like you can't run it back with this exact roster because I don't think this exact roster can get it done. But what it also tells me is that maybe they have more faith in Derek White now after what they saw from him this past season. And I'm a huge Derek White fan. I really like him. I think he was a little underappreciated in Boston. And I do think he has the potential to be that true point guard. And that's what I always wondered with Smart was whether he had the capability to really be that true point guard that the Celtics needed. And from an offensive standpoint, he was pretty inconsistent, and that maybe could have been ultimately the reason why the Celtics decided to move him because they felt like they could go maybe a different direction and feel like it could be a better fit. I'm hard pressed to believe that Brad Stevens is done with the offseason. I think there's more moves that he wants to make. Getting Porzingis does, I think, solve a lot of the big man problems that the Celtics did have. I am worried about health. Like you said, he does need to stay healthy. And I think he has been a little underwhelming in other situations he's been in. But I really like the fact that he gets to kind of share the workload in Boston because Rob Williams is still, the primary big man, but health is a concern for him also because he can't really stay healthy either. But I think, one of the things that was tough to see in the playoffs for the Celtics was they got absolutely dominated on the boards. They really were not rebounding as much as other teams were. So that was something I was hoping they would address. I think he can help with that. So I think it was a good move to bring him in. Ultimately, it was interesting because it was a 3-team trade. And I think, Washington's end of the deal was definitely a little interesting that they only got a second round pick from Memphis and the Celtics managed 2 first round picks. So I thought that was interesting. But hearing Marcus Smart's name being part of that trade was tough. Because obviously originally, the plan was they were trying to move Brogdon and there was that whole trade going on and then it fell through with the Clippers and all that. And I think it would have been tough for Celtics fans to see Brogdon go because obviously he was the 6th man of the year and he provided some great bench depth, but I don't think it would have hurt people emotionally as much as it hurts losing Smart.
Agreed. A lot of great points because I was thinking, I remember the first initial trade was for, like you said, for Brogdon, and Porzingis was going to come there. And then when that one fell through because of health concerns with Brogdon, I guess he has some real big health concerns. The Clippers just said no thanks, or anything like that. But then the Celtics were still trying to push forward with we want Porzingis, so they're like, okay, we're going to have to give up something big. So I'm thinking, okay, who else now? If it's not Brogdon, okay, is it Derek White? Is it? I thought about maybe Mark Smart. I thought even Jaylen Brown was on the block. It's like I just knew Tatum was one of the ones they're not going to give up, or was it Al Horford? What was it going to be? And when I wake up the next morning and it's Marcus Smart, it happened, I guess, after midnight. This trade, it was late before midnight, and I'm thinking, wow, they actually traded Marcus Smart, and then they got Porzingis. Like I said, I'm with you. I think it's a mix. With the trade, getting Porzingis, he did play 60 plus games this year, which is the most he's played in years, and he was very productive when he was with the Wizards. This past season, averaging 23 points, I think a career high. So he does bring offense, but something that I think it was Kendrick Perkins who said it was interesting. Celtics, their problem wasn't offense really. I mean, yes. The half court offense was stagnant, inconsistent because it was either Tatum or Brown bailing them out. So now you got a guy that can score, could get buckets up with the three or inside with Porzingis. So, but it wasn't that. Maybe the offensive flow was difficult to watch sometimes, but it was their defense. So then you trade your best defensive player, even though Porzingis can play D. He can play D too because he can protect the rim. He's 7'3", so he's a shot blocker. But with Robert Williams there too. But it wasn't a problem with offense. But him being the third guy, I mean, that's huge for them. Now, as you said, it takes pressure off Tatum. It takes pressure off Brown to always bail the Celtics offense out when it gets bogged down. And you're right. I think another point is too that maybe this is as far as they could go with this collection of this group, as you said earlier. And I believe that too. I think it's more now we have to break this up. And I agree. I think that they are also going to make more moves. Brad Stevens and them they're going to make more moves. I still feel like they need another ball handler. We talked about this for the last couple of years. They're going to need more ball handling because you can't rely on Brown being a ball handler, even though he's improved. Can't rely on him. Dirk White, can he take that full-time role as the point guard now? And with Brogdon's health, they do have a good 1-2 punch in the point guard position. Do they need another ball handler to help the bench out too? And now Grant Williams, he's probably gone. So who knows what's gonna so the Celtics are gonna make more moves too.
Yeah, I do believe they will. Brad Stevens hasn't really given me a reason not to trust him. And I think that's going to continue. I think ultimately he had to make some tough decisions. And I think he knew when he made that move that it was going to upset Celtics fans emotionally. But obviously at the end of the day, that's when you start to remember that for them, it is a business. And for them, it's what can we do to put our team in the best position to succeed. And I think with one of the biggest things going into this season that I'm looking at is the Celtics core now has had a year of experience with Joe Mazzulla as the head coach.
Yes.
And he's been able to really start to learn the players, and they've gotten to know him and his coaching style. And now they're surrounding him as a coach with some really talented assistant coaches that they're bringing on to his coaching staff. So I think that's also going to be beneficial for them because I definitely expected some growing pains, with him being a first-year head coach this past season. And I think we did see a lot of that. So I think that's going to be a good thing for them. I do agree with you, though. I still see a huge defensive problem. I think Marcus's defense degressed a little bit this past season from when he was Defensive Player of the Year. And I was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and he was saying, I feel like Marcus's best days are behind him in his career. I think we got him when he was at his best, and it's tough to make that kind of decision. But if ultimately at the end of the day it leads to the Celtics winning a championship, then people will then understand kind of why it had to happen that way. I don't think Marcus Smart would have been the first choice that Brad would have moved, but it's obvious to me that Memphis really, really wanted him. So I think he was forced to kind of make that kind of decision, but I don't think he makes that kind of decision without feeling like he can make it work elsewhere. Like he doesn't just trade Marcus Smart without having a plan in place. So I feel like they believe in Derek White, but I also think they get somebody else in there who can really, really be a top contributor for them. And ideally somebody who can play defense too, because like you said, their defense in the playoffs was not good at all. So I'd like to see somebody who can play defense when they do make more moves. I think at this point, I feel like they kind of have to keep Brogdon because by getting rid of Brogdon, they'd be getting rid of a lot of their bench depth. And I'm looking at their bench now. And if they were to get rid of him, I mean, you have like Grant Williams and Pritchard primarily off the bench if you get rid of Brogdon. But you do need the bench depth. And Brogdon was a big reason why they got to where they were this past season. And so it's hard to justify, moving him now. I actually think moving Marcus Smart solidifies more that they plan on keeping Brogdon and that they should keep him. Because it's hard to justify moving both of those guys. I do think we see maybe some more moves, but I don't think it'll be as severe like who they end up giving up. I think Marcus Smart was the only like big name on the team that we see get moved. I think because they moved Gallinari and they moved Muscala, but both of those players were because obviously Gallinari didn't play the whole season, and that was pretty sad because he worked really hard to get back to the team.
Yeah, he did.
But they moved him because obviously they felt like there's just not really a place for him on the team. And Muscala came at the trade deadline, but they really didn't use him that much. So obviously it made sense to move those two. So I don't think besides Marcus Smart, they end up moving any other big names. I think other than that, they want to keep the core together, but I do think they bring somebody else in before the offseason is over. And like I said, it's hard for me to not trust Brad Stevens because I do think he knows what he's doing in the position that he's in.
Yeah.
So I think that they do make another move, but I don't think it'll be a move that will involve giving up a core piece anymore.
Yeah, I agree, and I think there's going to be some more moves just for their bench depth, and because their starters are set, especially if Derek White starts along with Brown, Tatum, Porzingis, and either Al Horford or Rob Williams. It'll probably be Horford, and then Porzingis will be the center. I do like if they could stay healthy. I like their big men depth because you said, Porzingis, Horford, Rob Williams, and depending on where Grant Williams, if he stays or not, depending on that, that's where their big men depth. I do like. They had a lot of guards too. They had a lot of wing guards. So I guess losing Marcus Smart, and if you keep Brogdon, hopefully he can, hopefully his health issues is not as severe as they're saying. But I guess there was a lot. So now Marcus Smart goes to Memphis with John Morant suspended for 25 games. And as I said, now they needed the Memphis Grizzlies needed someone who will hold them accountable. And Marcus Smart will do that because he held Tatum and Brown accountable. He called them out when they needed to. He was their leader. He was their emotional leader, and he was their heart. Him going to Memphis. Now they said he's the adult on that team now and everything too. So he will call them out, and they needed someone like him. They got Steven Adams, but now they have Marcus Smart over there. He definitely tremendously helps with, like I said, with Ja out for 25 games. Marcus Smart can fill some of that void for the Grizzlies, and they get a veteran who's been to a finals, who's been to conference finals, who knows what to, how to get there and help a team get there so that he could maybe push that young team to where they need to go. Let's talk about another team, an older team. The Golden State Warriors got older and getting Chris Paul in a surprising move. It's funny. I was telling my wife, I was talking to her, we were talking about where will Chris Paul go? We knew when he got traded to Washington, he wasn't gonna be a Wizard. He was gonna go somewhere to try to win. The Wizards are on a full rebuild mode, which they probably should have, losing Bradley Beal, now losing Porzingis. Who knows if they're gonna re-sign Kuzma. Now they got Jordan Poole, and they got Tyus Jones, so they're trying to get younger. What did you think of Chris Paul going to Golden State? Was a surprise to you? Because it definitely was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't see the fit, but now that I'm thinking about it, he'll come off the bench. But they lost Jordan Poole. Poole was a big key. He was a big part of their championship run 2 seasons ago. Then they signed him for that long-term deal. But him and Draymond got into that when he got punched by Draymond, and there was you could tell from that season their season was just a mess. Them even getting to the second round. But now getting Chris Paul, a veteran who's trying to win a ring. What do you think was that move with the Chris Paul going to Golden State?
Yeah, definitely surprising to me too. Mm-hmm. I didn't see it coming. Like you, I knew that he wasn't going to stay with Washington. I think it's actually really smart of Washington to acquire him and then be able to flip him for more picks. And I think definitely that was good for them. I think Jordan Poole is going to prove to be a bigger loss for the Warriors than they might think it is right now, because he was a key part of that finals run, and he's a talented young player who they could have kept around for a while. And I think he was a solid part of that core of the team. And he was he was one of those players who was not really associated with the core of the Warriors, but he was like on the cusp and he was getting to that point, especially with his performance in that finals run. And so you kind of looked at the Warriors and he was almost in that conversation of being part of that core of the team.
Yeah.
So I was definitely surprised that they would give him up for Chris Paul. I'm still a little bit confused as to their thought process with acquiring Chris Paul. I mean, yeah, he won't start or anything like that. So he could be just a good presence to just have around. But to me, I wouldn't have given up Jordan Poole for someone like Chris Paul. I would have given him up for a more significant piece if I'm the Warriors. But I mean, maybe it'll work. I think with the players that Golden State has, I think Chris Paul will like playing there because he's surrounded by guys who have been there and been to the finals and they've won the championship multiple times. And so this is nothing new to that core of Golden State. So I think from that standpoint, he'll enjoy being there because at this point in his career, he really probably just wants to win a ring and that's it. Because obviously he hasn't won one before. So I think for Chris Paul individually, he might enjoy being in that type of situation because he's with guys who he knows have done this plenty of times before. And that's probably the type of place he should be at this point in his career if he wants to win a ring, because he doesn't want to be with a team where it's experimental and he's with players who aren't used to that pressure. So I think from that standpoint, it's good for him. But from the Warriors standpoint, I don't know how valuable he'd really be. And I don't see him making this huge difference in terms of, oh, the Warriors didn't go that deep in the playoffs in 2023, but he'll put them over the top in the 2024 postseason. I'm just not really seeing that as it doesn't scream like, oh, he's a fantastic fit for Golden State and he's going to get them to the finals again.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. It's like, okay, you got a veteran like Chris Paul who's been, there was 15, 16 years in his career. He went to the finals the one time, and he was on the Suns the last 3 years, but hasn't been healthy either. And then you said he's at the back end of his career. So I guess the Warriors with their core with that, I think this moves definitely gives, now that they moved on from Poole, they re-signed Draymond. And they picked Draymond over Poole. That's what it was. Because I don't think they could have went back into this next season because you could just tell there was an unbalance that after Draymond punched Jordan Poole, you could just tell the trust wasn't there. And the Warriors had a weird year. They was terrible on the road, and it took like Steph Curry to really like play a lot of minutes and Steve Kerr, that wasn't one of his best coaching, years either, because he wasn't playing a lot of the young guys. He started playing the young guys, and then he relied on the veterans, which is fine. But you could tell there was some issues, like some trust issue with Poole. He seemed like he wasn't engaged much for great reason. He wasn't engaged. He wasn't the way he was the last season. Yes, he got his money, so people might think, oh, he's changed because he got his money and he doesn't want to play as hard. He struggled a little bit. He didn't have the year that he had the past season, but it's still a young, talented player that I thought like he's going to be part of this. So I guess they made the decision. It's going to be is Draymond. We're going to take the veteran, the guy that's been on our core, the champion, over Jordan Poole. So that's what it seems like. What it's to me. Now you get Chris Paul. Like I don't know if it pushes him over the top, but they want to make one more. I think they think, okay, we got to make one more run with this core. We have the pieces. They still got a couple good young players, Moody and Kuminga. It's just Kuminga didn't play down the stretch. So like it just seemed like Kerr didn't trust the young guy enough of the young guys. But you get another old veteran on this team. I guess they said, hey, let's try to make a run. But if without looking at all the free agency yet, because free agency is next week, I don't think they beat Denver again. I don't feel like they're better than Denver. You got the Suns, who they got Beal, but they got to get some more depth. So, but they're going to be a problem. The Clippers, if they stay healthy, they're going to be a huge problem. Still can't count on LeBron and AD. So where does the Sacramento, who the Warriors did struggle against, but end up winning that series because they took a outworldly game from Steph Curry, was scoring 50 to get to win a game 7. So where does the Warriors fit in the West? I mean, I'm not going to count them out, but I just don't know where they fit with this Chris Paul move.
Yeah, I agree with you on the veterans. I think that they in their heads probably said, Chris Paul is a very experienced player. He's been to the finals and he knows how to be, in pressure situations. And so they probably feel like it made sense for them and what they're trying to do to get somebody in there who can help provide a lot of that experience to go with the experience they have. And so for them, I think this is a one and done with Chris Paul. I think this could very well be his last season. And I think they know that. And I think they're just like, why don't we just try to give it one last push, because that core of their team's going to be broken up, probably after that. So they probably looked at it at face value and said, he, from a veteran standpoint, leadership standpoint, can really help us out right now. And I think, that's what they're going for. Whether it'll work, I'm not really confident in that. But I think they feel like it could be a good chance for them to just, make another go. And obviously, because even when they went to the finals 2 years ago, I didn't think they were going to get to the finals that year either. So I guess it's hard to really count out that core of players, but there are so many teams in the West that are good now. And ultimately, when it comes to the Jordan Poole situation, I thought they were going to keep him, but I think he's a great fit in Washington for what they're trying to do. I think the Wizards are actually having a pretty good offseason so far. It's pretty clear that they're in full rebuild mode, and it made sense for them to get rid of Beal and Porzingis. With what it just wasn't really going to work, because it was like, it's almost like they randomly had those two, and then they just had a bunch of everybody else. So then it was like, they didn't really have they shouldn't be keeping those two guys if they don't have the talent around them right now that can win a championship. So it just kind of wasn't making sense. So I think it makes a lot of sense that they moved them, and Jordan Poole is a really talented young player that they can kind of start to build around now. And Tyus Jones is a really good player too. So I think he's a good addition to that team. They have a ton of picks now, and I think Wizards fans are going to have to be okay with not being good for a few years and losing a lot of games, but that's just kind of how it goes when you're in a rebuild. And I think that they are doing the right thing by the direction they're going in now, because they can just get a lot of young talent and develop people, and then just in a few years, then they can maybe start to make some moves for some really talented players to kind of surround those guys with. But I really like the Jordan Poole move for the Wizards. I like that a lot more than I like Chris Paul to the Warriors. I think that just makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with that. I think the Wizards, they're collecting all these second round picks. They're kind of like what the OKC Thunder was doing. It was just getting so many picks and making so many trades and really building. They're building on the young. They're trying to get younger and through the draft. And we don't know. I mean, they could make some moves in this off season too. So with the NBA trade deadline coming up too, so they got picks now, so they can really start to say, okay, we could make more moves and get more picks. Let's see what we got here. So yeah, there was just some odd trades, but hey, you never know what this. Because like I said, I agree. I think this is Chris Paul's last season, and I think he's one more run. He wants to get one more run at a championship. So last top I want to get into the draft and just talk about Victor Wembanyama. Man, this guy gets the right. He's in the right situation with the San Antonio Spurs, a world-class organization with Greg Popovich, championship organization. He's saying I'm going to fit and everything too. What's your expectations for? He's getting a lot of hype. They're saying probably the biggest hype since LeBron. So what do you think of Wembanyama being the number one pick? And he said 7'4" Frenchman who can handle the ball, play defense, shoot the three, something we haven't seen. A guy that size, what he can do. But what's your expectation for Victor Wembanyama?
Yeah, I think he's super fun. I'm actually really excited to watch him play.
Yeah,
I think he's somebody who, like you said, is in the right situation because he can really develop his game there with where the Spurs are at right now, and they can really help him kind of develop into a professional player. His size alone is gonna give him a big advantage, but I think he's a really athletic guy who can do a
yeah,
lot. And I think that's going to help him too. And, you know, obviously, I look back on when Zion got drafted and he had a lot of hype, and that was just super unfortunate because he just hasn't been able to stay healthy.
yeah,
Um, but so if he can stay healthy, though, I feel like this guy could be like a generational type of player because he does have the talent to get there. And if in the Spurs, I definitely think got a really, really good one. And you obviously never know with the draft because you don't really have a lot of people that pan out in every draft class. But I do think he's going to be one of the ones that does. And I think he deserves the hype that he's getting because just from watching videos of the guy play, he can do a lot of different things on the court. So I think that that ultimately is going to serve him really well. And I'm looking at him as, you know, we could look back on his career and say he's one of the best to ever play in the NBA. And that'd be really cool if we could see that from him because I do think this hype that he's getting is deserved. Because I think he is going to live up to a lot of the expectations people have for him. He's super fun and I think he's in a really good spot.
yeah. He's very confident, and he said, "Hey, expectations, hype. Hey, I'm ready." And I think getting with Greg Popovich, who knows how long he's going to coach. Pop always looks like he's about to retire and say, you know, we got the number one pick. Maybe I'll stay a year or two just to see. And they can develop him even slowly now in San Antonio, being in San Antonio. I mean, instead of being in a huge market like New York or LA or Philly or Chicago, getting him in San Antonio, kind of like Giannis Antetokounmpo when he came out. He didn't have very high expectations, but I mean, it's different when Miyama having to be the number one pick. But they could develop him slowly and get him going. And then he just starts, because you said with the size and his athleticism at that 7'4", it can shoot, it can get up and down the floor. Just got to get a little stronger. It does remind me of a little bit of a Kevin Durant or Garnett, how they came in with that's not as big, the tall height wise, but the athleticism and they were just their body frame was just skinny. He had put on some weight, just kind of like Garnett did. And Garnett became one of the best, and Kevin Durant, same thing. But yeah, I think I'm looking forward to see what he can do, and with the expectations, and will that translate and transition? How soon? And what he's like say he's a generational talent, and I think he's in the right situation with the right organization. They'll definitely keep him grounded and just let him develop as big as he is. He might come out and just, I don't know if he's going to dominate because no one really comes in and dominates, but he's definitely going. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. So we'll see what he does. But Gabby, again, we went another hour. We could go a couple more hours, but I won't keep you much longer. But again, I really, really appreciate the time, the conversation, and everything. I really enjoy it each and every time we do a show together, and we definitely will be doing future shows, I'm sure, in the future coming up. Football season's coming up, and everything. Fantasy football's coming up, so I'm definitely gonna have you back on, talk some football, and give our predictions, things like that. So let everyone know they can follow you, find your work, find the new show, and everything else.
Yeah, so I am on all forms of social media. So on Twitter at Gabby Hurlbut 10, at Instagram at Gabby underscore Hurlbut 10, and at Facebook, Gabby Elizabeth. I do drop live streams of Boston Balling on Facebook. So you can also follow Boston Balling on Facebook. It also has its own Twitter account at Boston Balling and an Instagram at Boston underscore balling underscore podcast. I do like to post a lot of sports related polls on Instagram to kind of start conversation with people. So if you're into that, you can definitely follow me there. Boston Bowling, you can find on any podcast platform as well. Spotify, Apple, Google Play, iHeart Podcasts, or YouTube. If you like YouTube as well, I drop the episodes there. And then Locked On Red Sox also has its presence at Twitter. On Twitter, you can follow at LO_Red Sox. You can also subscribe to Locked On Red Sox on any of those same platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google Play. There's also a YouTube channel for the show, so you can follow that as well. And so a lot of discussion that I do on social media. So if you follow me on Twitter or you follow one of the shows on Twitter, I post a lot of just, questions about the team for people to answer, maybe start some discussion about people's thoughts on different things. So I'm very much all about that interaction. So if you're interested in that, definitely check it out. I'm still going to be doing Boston Bowling as well. So it's definitely a lot going on, but I love doing it and I love podcasting, and it's definitely something that I'm very grateful to be a part of.
Yes. Everyone follow Gabby on all the socials, all the podcasts. She says she has now a daily podcast, so check that out. Locked On Red Sox and Boston Ballin', the weekly podcast as well. Follow her. He says she's very active on social media, Twitter and Instagram. And I'm sure we're going to be doing some live. We usually do lives during the NBA free agency. We'll probably have in Nathan and my best friend James. We did that last time, so I'm sure I might do something next week. So be on the lookout if I'm doing a live. You do a lot of lives as well during the playoffs and the finals and the draft and the free agency, which is next week. So, but I really, really appreciate you, Gabby, for again coming on the show. Enjoy your weekend, and looking forward to all the great content.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. As always, this hour flew by. I feel like it always does when you and I are getting into different things, talking sports, because like you said, we could probably do it all day. It's always a good time, and I really appreciate it as always.
Yeah, definitely, I appreciate it too. And again, enjoy the weekend, and we are this. You can follow, like I said, follow The Real Deal on all social. And I always say, just Google The Real Deal with Cordy Harden. I'm on everywhere too: Instagram, Facebook, Spreaker, Roku, BS3 Network. So again, I'll be sharing this with you, Gabby. As I think I've shared it all through the social media. So everyone that wants to get to the recap of the show, it'll be on there. I've shared it on Instagram as well. It's on YouTube and Spotify and Google. So YouTube. So thank you again. Really appreciate it. And until next time, everyone stay safe and peace and God bless.